why hello. I just put on this little cape shirt thing that I made. It's very good texture. Anyway, not the point. So I really enjoy the show Jentry Chau versus the Underworld. I've seen it multiple times. And every time that I post a video about it, I am flooded with comments of people saying how much they like Kit. And don't get me wrong, Kit is a great character, like very well written, but I don't think that we're supposed to like him. Like, people are very upset that he died and said that he deserved justice or whatnot, or that he was treated so terribly, and I am just sitting over here very confused because it seemed very clear to me that he's not supposed to be perceived as a good person. He's not an evil person by any means. He's very morally gray, but he was harming other people through selfish choices and then weaponizing his misunderstanding. A beautiful part of this show is how every character is riddled with flaws, like genuine flaws. And then how those flaws or those issues affect other characters is also a huge part of the show. Like all the lies that Gentry's been told by her grandmother, or how Ed is kind of exploiting Jentry for internet fame, or how Michael struggles to communicate what he wants, or how Stella planned her entire future around a single person based on assumptions, or how Flora has been manipulating people to the point where several people have died. I could talk about any of these characters for quite a while, but I want to focus on Kit for this video because I think it speaks to a bigger issue that people can rationalize his mistreatment of others, either because they relate to him or maybe because he's conventionally attractive, because that's a common problem. Of course, my interpretation may not be entirely correct. I am not the writer, I'm just a writer. Between having a writing degree and having plenty of experience with abuse, I find it a bit disheartening that I receive a ton of hate comments every time that I try to explain my perspective on this matter. Like, I've been in a lot of similar situations to Jentry, as well as I have a similar backstory, I guess, to Kit with, being rejected for something you can't control. Everyone's allowed to have their own opinions, so I don't know why mine are so disliked despite the amount of critical thinking I'm putting into this. Okay, let me give my analysis now. I am under the impression that Kit's character was to show us what not to do and what not to fall for. He is representation of what abusive, toxic love interests can look like, and a pretty good example of what trauma can look like if it's left untreated. I'd like to explain my reasoning for this, and I kind of hope that this video does more than just kind of entertain you, but also teaches you something. So let's go through Kit's arc in an objective lens. Kit makes a deal with Chang to kill Jentry in return for a human soul, a valid thing to want given how traumatic his life has been so far. But he stalks Jentry to find out what she likes, and it's implied that he quite literally shaped himself into what she would have wanted in a boyfriend in order to get close enough to kill her. He manipulates her into trying to kiss her in order to drain her chi. And side note, admittedly, I am Arrow A, so maybe I'm just not seeing something here, but I find that the way that he goes about his romantic actions are a little odd. Like, pretty forced, pretty scripted. Like, the whole, if you fall, I'll catch you was really strange to me. But once again, I cannot claim any knowledge on things that are romantic. Moving on. After Jentry tells him, you are who you choose to be, he decides he doesn't need a human soul after all and would rather be with Jentry instead. And that's great. Like, good for him. Yay, Kit. Although Jentry is a minor, so it's good in the sense that Kit wants to become a better person, but bad in the sense that he wants to be with a 16-year-old when he is multiple centuries old. He even tries protecting Jentry from the man who hired Kit to kill Jentry. Once again, good job, Kit. Making good decisions. Proud of you. But then when Jentry finds out the truth about him and is visibly scared and runs away like every other person he's ever had a relationship with, which is sad, and I will come back to this moment because I think it's important, Kit doesn't take it well, because who would? That would sting. But instead of realizing maybe you don't want to be with someone who's afraid of you, he becomes obsessed with her and starts manipulating situations to get what he wants, which is fascinating because it's kind of like he took the phrase, you are who you choose to be, a little too far. The thing that made him fall for Jentry is now being misinterpreted, and he's using it against her. But here's the thing from that moment, I don't think that Jentry was wrong for running from him, because right before this, she was warned about him, and she didn't believe that warning. So when she finds out that he is a demon, her first thought was likely, this guy is trying to kill me. So any reasonable person would run. We as the audience know that she doesn't have any issues with demons. Her best friend, Ed, is a demon. But given the information she was just presented, although the fact that that kid did save her, it does make sense for her reaction to be, I need to protect myself. Like, it would be a very scary thing for you to find out the guy who's been flirting with you for a while is actually a demon working for the guy who's trying to kill you. She doesn't have the whole story, but that doesn't matter because she's doing what she thinks is best for her in that moment, and no one can really blame her for that. And she does end up accepting him for who he is, at least to some degree. She's weirded out at the whole skin thing. I need to point out here, in case other people haven't put two and two together, although Kit's situation could be seen as an allegory, if you look at it from like what we're literally being presented with, he's a demon who makes things out of human skin, and to a human, that would be quite terrifying. When Jentry goes to Kit for help, you could argue that she was using him, but there were some subtle details that make it seem like she was genuinely flattered by some of the things that he was saying during the moments where he was like making a skin suit, and she was still trying to help him, mostly for personal gain. However, it would benefit him. So Kit gets all dressed up in Gentry's look-alike costume thing. And then when Michael shows up, Kit takes advantage of that to say that Jentry won't go to the dance with him, despite Jentry directly telling him through the earpiece not to do that. Like, Kit quite literally tells Michael that Jentry and Kit have been getting closer. She tells him that this is not okay, because it's not. He was deliberately taking away her choice in that situation. In fact, he was deliberately going against what her choice was in that situation. Initially, it seemed like he was trying to do the right thing and close the door and say, this is not the right moment, maybe come back later. But then he took advantage of the situation. But intentionally taking away someone's autonomy for personal gain in this way doesn't really have an excuse. But this is even worse considering the fact that they'd had this discussion earlier in the day about having a human soul is who you choose to be, and then he takes away Gentry's ability to choose. I have been asked before if I am Team Michael or Team Kit. I am neither. I am Team Therapy, okay? But in all seriousness, like, narratively speaking, like, Kit wasn't exactly an option here. He was a love interest, but he was a toxic, problematic love interest. And then, like, halfway through the season, it's like, yeah, no, he is not on the table anymore. He goes from love interest to obstacle. It makes sense for her to end up with Michael if she was going to end up with anyone. Of course, I don't really like romance plots, so I don't care. But from the very beginning, it was quite clear that if she was going to end up with anyone, it would be Michael. So after that whole autonomy stealing incident, Kit makes a mum out of skin, which is a strange thing to do considering how often Jentry has expressed discomfort with that kind of thing, like not only with the frog scene, but also when he was making a skin suit of her, she was very visibly grossed out. Like, that's not a great impression. He simply does not pick up on the fact that Jentry does not want a relationship with him. She could have just said she wasn't interested, or even brought up the fact that he was trying to kill her, and that's kind of hard to get over, instead of calling him not normal. Like, that wasn't very nice. But she was pretty clear that she was rejecting him, and he didn't accept that rejection. Kit is clearly jealous of Michael and tries to romance Jentry despite her obvious disinterest. He holds out some flowers and she tries to walk past him, but he puts his arm up to block her from walking away, and she has to shove past him. Like, tell me, if someone who was not conventionally attractive were to do the same thing, you would immediately pick up on the red flag, right? He goes back to stalking her, which I think is kind of interesting that he returns to that behavior. He watches from a distance while she's trying on dresses in a shop, which, this wasn't a dressing room, but unless he's like there to try on dresses or as a friend that's trying on dresses, this is a little strange because there's no reason for him to be there. So that's like very stalkerish behavior. In the words of Jentry, he has been harassing her for an entire week despite it being so clear that she doesn't want to be with him. His excuse is that she said she wanted normal, and he's doing what he thinks humans do to express love. And I'm going to assume that a lot of people are interpreting this as kind of like a neurodivergent allegory. But as a heavily neurodivergent person, please don't. He's not behaving that way because he's a neurodivergent person or because he's representing a neurodivergent person. He's behaving that way because he's not taking accountability for his actions. This is what humans do to express love is a strange thing to hear from someone who has spent multiple centuries posing as a human and assumingly learning from them. He has established in a previous episode that he has lived multiple lives. So like you'd think that he'd figure out what is acceptable and like what is damaging to other people. Like he's witnessed so much and he really wants a relationship, so you think he'd take the time to figure out what is like a positive thing to do and what's a negative thing to do. It's not his fault that he was rejected for something that he didn't choose. However, he has the choice to take responsibility and accountability for his actions. And like, if you want to have a relationship with a person, romantic or otherwise, it's important to take responsibility to treat them correctly if you want to be treated correctly. I'd also like to take a moment to further explain the whole centuries old thing, because this is worse than Twilight. Jentry is 16 and Kit is an undisclosed number of centuries old. It could be 2, it could be 10. We don't know how old he is, but we do know he's lived enough lives to know that this kind of behavior is abusive, manipulative, and damaging. I've heard the argument that a couple centuries in demon is equivalent to teenager in human years, but this wasn't disclosed in the show, so I don't know where it's coming from. But I also don't think that this is the case, because Jentry used that as a reason why not to be with him, and Kit didn't like clarify anything. Like, he didn't make the argument that he's technically her age when that would have been the perfect opportunity to do so. But like, more importantly, he has lived multiple human lives. He has more life experience, which is the reason why age gaps are weird in the first place, because he's like, he knows a lot more than she does, and she's a minor. The funniest part about this argument to me, though, is the fact that his age doesn't actually matter. A 16-year-old abuser is still an abuser. Okay, I said my piece about the age thing, so we can get back to when Jentry confronts Kit after the week of harassment. She could have gone about it better, because Jentry knows that Kit is sensitive about being a demon, or at least she seems to understand to some degree. But it's also not entirely clear if Kit is really uncomfortable with being a demon, because he did hand her a bunch of skin. But even if the way that she rejected him wasn't, you know, the best way, it's as Jentry said herself, it shouldn't matter why she's saying no. And I think that this was placed into the dialogue as it was to show that Kit is not in the right here, because that was a very deliberately delivered line. Because like, it doesn't matter why someone's saying no. If someone says no to your romantic advances, the answer is no. And it shouldn't matter why she's saying no, but you know, he is a serial killer, and I know that he needs to eat to survive, which means taking the souls of people. However, Jentry also needs to survive. I think my subjectivity is coming through a little bit right now, but anyway, this is my YouTube video though, that's allowed. I remember there being a comment saying that, but he said that she should have what she wants. And yeah, he did say that, after punching a locker until it was concave and then cornering her against the wall. He didn't touch her, but he didn't have to. That's still a very scary thing to experience. Jentry was visibly terrified, but he didn't seem to care. He said it with a menacing tone. He was aggressive. Like, context matters, people. Also worth noting that one of the times that he tried to kiss her in the past was kind of in a very similar position. Like, he had his arm up against the wall, just like when he was telling her that. I don't know if that detail was intentional. It kind of felt like it was, because that'd be a really interesting way to show that he's kind of been this way all along. Kit then goes on to steal the Yellow Emperor robes with the powers in it so that he could be with Jentry, not just because he wanted humanity, but because he wanted to be with Jentry despite her saying no so many times. And if you're going to defend Kit's actions and use his intentions as the reason, then you should be understanding of Jentry's decisions as well. Like, she chose not to trust him based off of the information she had about him, and I feel like that's valid. When Kit dies for Jentry, he admits that everything he's been doing so far has been for him, but this one thing is for her. I feel like this has the potential to be interpreted in more than one way. Like, from face value, it is that he was selfish the whole time and he's finally selfless. And if you believe that he's genuinely selfless, then this is a pretty natural end for his story, because he realized it was impossible for him to get what he wanted. He couldn't be with Jentry and he couldn't become human. And his trauma was likely telling him in his head that he couldn't be loved for who he was, which isn't true. I'm sure he would have found someone, but his trauma was probably telling him that. This means he only had one loose end left, and there was only one last thing tying him to this world, which was Jentry and how she hadn't forgiven him. So he sacrificed himself in order to get Jentry to forgive him, so that he could have that conclusion. Because it's kind of hard not to forgive someone who gives their life for you. But there's another way to interpret it, and I feel like a lot of people aren't gonna like it. Sacrificing yourself could still be a selfish act depending on the situation, and this might be one of those situations. Because sacrificing yourself does not make you a good person. It's one good thing that you've done, but it doesn't erase any bad things that you've done. He didn't even do it for the best reason, might I add. He did it for Jentry, but like the world was ending and he caused that, so I feel like if he was a good person, he would try to save the world because he broke it. Like, there are portals opening from different worlds and coming in to destroy things because of a selfish choice that he made, and now he's only trying to make amends to Jentry rather than trying to fix what he caused. Him dying did stop the world from ending, but he was only doing it to save Jentry. I don't want to minimize the fact that he gave his life for Jentry, but I do want to point out that someone doing one good thing at the end of their life does not change any abusive actions that they had in the past. Like, if you take away the fantasy setting, right? Like, imagine a couple where one of them is very abusive to the other, but then they decide they're gonna take out that person for dinner once a month. Does that make them a good person? No. You need to be consistently doing good things to be a good person. Also, toxicity is often not the absence of good moments, but the inconsistency. Also worth noting that that act of selflessness was not a redemption arc. Some people might see it as a redeeming moment, but an arc has to be a little bit longer than a moment. Versus if I can like compare it to Jinu from K-pop Demon Hunters, because like it's kind of a similar situation. Jinu did have a redemption arc because he was progressively becoming a better person throughout the movie. But Kit was actually getting worse throughout the movie, and then at the last second did something right. I'm not saying that Kit deserved to die, but I also don't think that it was an injustice, as a lot of people are saying. It made sense narratively for his arc to end there. The reason I am making this video is because it's important for people to recognize that having love for a person or understanding someone's trauma does not excuse abusive or toxic behaviors. Trauma can be a reason why someone's acting a certain way, but until they've actively done the work to rectify the situation in an appropriate way, and ideally on the terms of the person they hurt, and done the work to better themselves, someone having a tragic backstory doesn't give them a pass to maltreat other people. If you want to disagree with any of my points, that's fine, but it will be painfully obvious if you haven't watched the video or if you just haven't thought about what I've said. So please use critical thinking skills when commenting. I will not be replying to points that I believe are continuing to glorify, romanticize, or excuse abuse. And liking a character does not mean you have to defend their actions, so you can like a toxic character by all means, just don't say that what they did was okay if it wasn't. So I can see why people think of Kit as their favorite character, but I am please asking you to stop defending his actions, because that is very harmful. It's funny when I call out Kit's actions and then people go, did we even watch the same show? Because clearly not. Clearly we have not seen the same show. Just note that if someone starts treating you the way that Kit was treating Jentry, run. Okay, goodbye.